Welcome to the Better Workday Podcast with your host, Niamh Moynihan. Niamh, as someone who tries to help others have a better workday, what are some of your favourite things about what you do? And what are some key takeaways we can bring to our own working week?
Hello, and welcome back to the Better Workday Podcast. This week is my birthday week, and so I decided to do something a little bit different with this episode. Today, I'm going to share with you a few of my favourite things about the work that I do and the people that I work with. And by the end of the episode, I hope you understand a little bit more about what I do, first of all, and more importantly, that you're inspired to maybe help other people create a better workday, taking some of the ideas that I do and bring them back to your work, whether it's with a small team or bigger department, maybe even the entire organization. And there's no particular theme in terms of these things. They are just the elements of my work that make me smile, that make me happy, and that make me show up even on the days where honestly I'd rather have a day off. Like us all. So first things first, in case you don't know the different ways that I work with people, I'll explain that to you and then we can go into my favourite things. I work with people live in person in terms of delivering keynote talks. That would be to big audiences of, a couple of hundred people. I deliver workshops, which could range from 12 people up to 90 people. And that could be anything from a half day to a full day or multi-days. And they're really interactive. I love them. And then I do webinars, and they're live interactive webinars. And I'm a big fan of hybrid working, and I'll be talking about hybrid working next week. But I try to make my webinars as similar to the experience that you'd have as if you're in person. So they're just as interactive, just as chatty, just as fun, and with just as much life. So again, there could be any number of people on those webinars. Sometimes there's 10, sometimes there's 1,000. But they're great fun as well, believe it or not. And then finally, I do have some self-serve or some on-demand stuff, which is great for people who work, let's say, in smaller organizations that would never have somebody like me in, or maybe, a lot of people like myself are interested in continually investing in their own professional development. And they're great too. So they're a great option for that. So that's basically what I do in a nutshell. There's always a few other bits and bobs, but that's the main stuff. And my absolute favourite thing of all of the work that I do is when I'm in front of people, whether that's in person or live through a webinar, and I get to make them laugh and have a little bit of fun. It is the most heartwarming, uplifting experience to have a group of people and make them giggle and lighten their mood and lighten the energy in the room and bring people together. And it is so rewarding. And I think it's so important because a lot of the time, the reason I'm brought in is because maybe people are stressed, you're overworked, the organization is very busy, or you're going through a lot of change. So there's a lot of stuff going on. And that's only in terms of the work, not to mind what could be going on in your personal life. And so to be able to give people a few moments of lightness where we can laugh and share and joke together and even be a little bit silly, I think it's really, really important. And so for you, if you are part of a team, one thing I'd say to you is try to be the person that lightens the mood, that lightens the room, whether it's online or in person, because there's so many things to deal with in a working day. It's always nice to break it up with a little bit of lightness. So that's hands down my absolute favourite thing. Love it. I love it. Love it. Second thing that I absolutely love is getting people, especially when it's a team, to see each other in agreement with some things that they'd like to change. And what I mean by that is, for example, I believe that one of the key problems we have today in the terms of hybrid and remote working is this fear of being offline or being yellow on Teams or on Google Chat or whatever you use. So a lot of people I speak to, in theory, they're saying they take their breaks, but in reality, there's this kind of worry that they'll go yellow and what would that be seen as, to other people. So you would rush back from your lunch, you'd rush back from the bathroom, or you'd rush back from getting a cup of tea to keep yourself green. This is also true if they want to, by the way, take a half an hour, away from the screen to do some planning or to do some writing or some offline reading, that you'd almost have one hand on the mouse clicking and moving things around so that you don't go yellow. In the sessions, I ask people to raise their hands. So it's either a physical hand or a digital thumbs up. If you agree that it's okay to be away, that it's okay to go yellow for a couple of minutes while you do something else. And everybody raises their hand. And if I'm in a room, I get people to turn around and I'm like, look, everyone here is in agreement. You all want the same thing. You all believe it's okay to be away. It's okay to take a break. It's okay to do your planning on paper. It's okay to not be constantly green. And when people look around, or else if you're on a webinar, they see all those thumbs going up and you see that you're not the only one that wants this, that you're not the only one that thinks this way, that you all want the same thing, even when it's not so easy to achieve on the day to day, but you're all in the same direction, that creates a powerful foundation for actually making a change. And so sometimes my sessions are less about the content per se, but more about getting people to see that you're all on the same page, that you all do want to improve how you work on your own and together and improve your well-being. So I absolutely love those moments when everyone is looking left and right and they see that they're not the only person with their hand up, and it is just lovely, 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 lovely. For you, if you want to do something like this, it could be having a similar conversation in your next team meeting and bring up something like, do we think it's okay to be away? Do we all want to take our breaks? Do we all agree that people don't need to respond out of hours? Whatever it is for you, if you agree together live, real time, and you're all physically putting up your hands or digitally putting your thumbs up, it allows you to get that consensus and to see you're not the only one. So I do recommend doing that if it's a change that you want to start making. So number 3 on my absolute favorite things is the questions that I get and the conversations that I have with people. Now, an interesting observation, and I don't know if you relate to this, is over the last few years, I find that less people put their hands up in groups for questions. And this is true whether there's a group of 500 people at a keynote, 20 people at a half-day workshop, or a different number of people on an online webinar. I say any questions, and there's usually tumbleweed. So especially in 2024, what I've done is I have allowed time for questions, but I also stay on afterwards for anyone who wants to wait and ask me a question on their own. So when I'm in person, that usually looks like me hanging around for tea and coffee or over lunchtime, depending on what time of the day it is. And when it's a webinar, I would, let's say, finish the webinar 15 minutes to the hour, and I say, I'm going to be the last person on this session. I'm not leaving until you're all gone. So if anyone here wants to ask me a question, just hang back. There's never more than 5 people who hang back, but there's always a few. There's always a few. And to be able to ask and answer those questions, I think, is so important, because when we're doing training, when we're doing workshops, when we're doing personal development, if there's something left unanswered, then you're not going to be coming away with as much as you could have from the session from that time. So I think it's important to be able to close that loop. If you're delivering training, or if there's training happening in your company, or if there's any kind of a situation where you're having an opportunity to learn, develop, grow, then I'd highly recommend leaving that space at the end, not for the old style Q&A that we're used to, but literally just to hang back and say, if anyone wants to ask a question, just yourself, we'll go over in the corner and we'll have that conversation, or we'll stay on the Teams call until the end and we'll have that conversation, and allow that to happen. Because as convenient as it is for that group Q&A, if nobody is asking the questions, it's not working anymore. And so we have to always meet people where they're at. There's so much more that I enjoy, as you're probably starting to guess at the moment. And the reason I'm sharing this again is because I want you to see why bringing people together, whether online or in person, is so valuable. Because they get to connect, you get agreement, you get to support each other. And the 4th thing for me is that people get back to basics. Because work can get very complex and very complicated and very fast paced at the moment, especially if you add in multiple locations, different departments, multiple projects, all these things. There can be a lot going on. And often we forget the very basics of how to manage our day, manage ourselves, manage our relationships with others. And you don't need an advanced course in performance and productivity. What you need is the space to get back to basics, to reset that foundation so that you can have it as the base on which your work performs better. It's going back to those very simple techniques, those building blocks of the working day that I find so rewarding, because they're things that people already know most of the time, but we've forgotten, or they know, but I have a different way of maybe implementing it or different examples of how they can do it. And so they're just twisting it a little bit. So instead of having to redo the entire way that you approach your day, you're just tweaking things. I think that's very important as we continue to develop new skills, both technical and non-technical skills in the workplace, that we try to leverage what we already have and build on that as opposed to trying to learn everything from scratch. If you're looking at your own development over the course of the next year or so, take a look at what you know already. Take a look at maybe what you used to do but you don't do anymore. And that can be tricky to do on your own. So maybe team up with somebody and have a bit of a reflective session and look at the different areas of your work and see how you can build on what you already have, or how sometimes you can dust off what you've forgotten. And that can be just as helpful. And finally, for me on this episode, because honestly now, this episode could go on for an hour and we all know that's not my style. But final thing for me is when I see people change how they think about their work and their working day and how good their working day is and how well they perform. And nearly everyone I meet gives themselves a hard time, that they think they're not doing enough, that they could be doing better, that there's loads of improvement to be made. And honestly, I'm here to tell you now, everybody is just here trying to do their best, okay? And your best is all you can give. And if you try to bend yourself into some version of perfection, you're just going to break. And so it's less about you completely transforming yourself and more about you maybe changing your approach to your work or your approach to your colleagues, or just tweaking something you're already doing. And sometimes that's tweaking your mindset as opposed to anything else. And so at the end of a lot of workshops, I ask one of two questions. And these are questions which I want you to take away and ask yourself or ask of the team whenever you do something that's new, a new training, you explore something new, look at a new project, anything like that. And the two questions I ask, it's normally one or the other, is first of all, what one thing will you do differently? And that's to help people just really focus on one action they can take. And by the way, I love this when it's online because you see all the messages streaming through and you get people upvoting certain suggestions. So again, that builds that sense of I'm not the only one doing this, because, you know, maybe one thing you'll do differently is plan your week on a Wednesday for the following week, and then you get 10 upvotes. So you're like, I'm not the only one doing this. And that's just really, really good reinforcement. So I love that question. What one thing will you do differently? And then the second one, which I think is so, so powerful, is when I ask people to fill in the statement, I used to think, but now I think. So what did you think before the session and what do you think now? Quite often, the general theme is, I used to think I had to do loads of stuff differently and I had to completely change the way that I work and I had to try to do all those new things. But now I think that if I'm kinder to myself, if I give myself and others a little bit of compassion and patience and grace and maybe tweak one or two fundamentals of how I run my week, I'll be fine. And it's that sense of relief that you don't have to take on a massive self-improvement project to create a better workday. And I love seeing people realize that, because we have enough going on not to mind adding any unnecessary pressure. If you're running anything or if you're part of a team that's running anything, there are two questions that you can ask at the end to really make sure that people know what they're taking away from it. As I approach another spin around the sun, I am really excited about helping more people to create a better workday. If, by the way, you'd like to join me for a better workday in November, it's a live online course. It's over 4 weeks starting on the 4th of November, and I have plenty of space for you. So contrary to some other programs, I have plenty of space. There is a morning session and there's an afternoon session. And if there's demand for a third session, then a third session will be scheduled. So you are welcome. I would love to see you. And if you have any questions, you can drop me a message, drop me an email. My details will be in the show notes. As always, I hope you found this helpful and maybe inspiring this week. Please share it with a friend or a colleague who you think would find it beneficial. And until next week, stay well and have a better workday.
Thank you for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this episode. The Better Workday podcast is about helping you have a better workday. So we'd love to hear your thoughts and questions. You can find our social media details as well as any references from this episode in the show notes.